I'm Jennifer Ferguson with Artistic Painting Studio. What I'm doing today is starting with the drawers of a hutch that I've had. This was one of those great finds. I was actually just out shopping one day and it was a store that was closing and they had an old hutch that I just fell in love with and thought I absolutely had to have it. So I bought it and stuck it in the corner of my warehouse. Okay, as usual, you know, you buy things, think you're going to paint them, and they just kind of get stuck aside. And then actually one of my bookcases in my office started collapsing, okay? So now it is one of those projects that we need to get this done because it's gonna go in my office and replace the falling down bookcase. So to start with, I took this thing out into the alley about a month ago and sanded it completely down to the raw wood. And I did that because the paint was just able to be scratched off with a fingernail and I was really afraid of going forward with that and having failure. So it was completely down to raw wood and it was just old oak, and I primed it so that I was ready to start for you guys today. And I'm going to share with you my favorite primer, which is XIM bonding primer. I love this stuff. It hasn't ever failed me. So now that I'm all primed, I'm going to tape off my center panel here. It has a raised panel where I'm going to actually create the hammered metal texture that I'm going to do on the drawers. Now I want you guys to realize that I'm only doing the drawers today. Who knows how long it'll be before I actually get the entire hutch finished, but this will be a good start and a great motivator. And if another shelf breaks on the bookcase, we'll have to really get motivated and get this thing done. So hopefully the bookshelf will hold up long enough for me to complete a project. Sometimes it just gets busy around this studio and we don't get everything done that we set out to do. So I love working with all the blue tape. It's nice because it's delicate and it doesn't always hurt your surface. So I've got the center panel taped off, which is a real quick little thing to do. But this is just gonna save me time from having to do any extra sanding in the end because the product's gonna get kind of stuck on the edges and I don't wanna have to sand too much. So the next thing that we're gonna do is I'm going to be using my Artsyville embellishment texture medium to roll the patterned roller through, the ostrich roller. So this is a wonderful product that I developed that is really easy to trowel onto a surface. And all the rollers seem to roll through it really easy. Some products out there are a little slick or they just got different textures and they're not as user friendly. So this is a wonderful one to work with. And I want to show you guys a couple different ways to actually, you know, trowel the product on. And one of the most simple ones that I've found that seems like everybody can get a hold of it is a old room key, okay? They're like a styrene, they're plastic, they're flexible, they're really easy to use. So I'm going to use this today. But a couple other things, you could always just use a wide putty knife. This tool here, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's got a straight edge on it. It's a little bit flexible. Again, just a nice straight edge. And then you could always use a trowel. And a trowel is probably my favorite, but I want to show you guys how to use the room key. So I'm just going to dip in here and grab some material. So as I'm putting this on, it's pretty thin. I always say you just need enough product for the roller to print through, and that's about it. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? It doesn't have to be even, and there's really almost no way to get it perfectly even on there. So you just want to have enough that when you're rolling through with the print roller, that there's enough material for the print to get into the texture. So this is the ostrich roller, which creates a really cool hammered metal look. So before I get started, I always try to spin it and make sure that it's spinning freely on the handle so that it doesn't slide or get stuck. And then I'm just going to roll through, which creates this really cool pitted look, okay? And if you just wanted that, you could leave it like that, but when I'm doing the hammered metal look, I normally will go through a couple of times and get it to where it's more pitted and looks more like hammered metal, okay? And I'm gonna have Andy get in here a little close and make sure you can see this. But when you roll through a couple times, you're going to notice that that product peaks up high. So this will completely dry Normally takes a couple hours, just depending on what time of the year. And once it's completely dry, I'm going to come back and sand off all those peaks, and that way it'll be still have a great texture but won't be rough to the touch at all. Okay, so this part is done, and I'm going to grab the one that I've already got done, and we're going to move to the next drawer. So this one here is completely dry, and I have gone ahead and sanded it back. I'm one who doesn't like to sand in my studio. It just makes a horrible mess, so I try to always go out the back door in the alleyway and do all the sanding. So I've already sanded this, but once I pull the tape, we're probably still going to have a little bit more sanding to do. Okay, so at this point, let me grab some sandpaper here, and I'm just going to clean up that edge a little bit and make sure that I have unburied any of the tape that got stuck underneath there. But believe me, taping off that panel and just having a little bit of cleanup, as I'm doing right now, is way better than having to clean up that whole edge of sanding, okay? So once you've sanded it down, I'm just trying to wipe it clean here so we don't have any dust. So the next thing is we're going to paint it. And I have chosen Modern Masters Metallics, and the color that we're going to use is called Antique Copper. And this is just a really, really pretty color. So working with the metallics, they go on, you have to check. Modern Masters is really great. I love the way that they've got all their packaging marked, because on the side of the jar, and I'm going to show you guys really quick, maybe Andy can even get in here. When it tells you the color, it'll also tell you if it's opaque, semi-opaque, or how many coats it normally will take, because some of their colors will almost opaque in one. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3, but it'll kind of, it gives you an idea of how opaque the paint is to begin with. And sometimes I might even decide on which color that I'm going to be working with based on how opaque the paint is. I've got some of my favorites just because they opaque within 2 coats. And if you're like me, I rather paint my project in 2 coats than 3 or 4. Because there's a lot of texture here, you kind of have to work it in a little bit, back and forth. So it's a little bit harder to get the top of it covered versus the sides where it's still nice and smooth. So that is the Antique Copper, and this will have to completely dry. I think it probably takes about an hour or so, just depending on where you are right now. And I would put on another complete second coat, okay? Because you want to make sure everything is covered. And another thing with metallics, and a lot of people don't know this, is metallics have what is basically called a memory. So it's kind of like when you vacuum your carpet and you vacuum this direction and you vacuum back the other direction, it lays the pile down. Metallics kind of have that same kind of memory. If I brush this direction, it's going to lay the metal particles that direction, and if I brush this direction, it's going to lay the metal particles the other way. So you could possibly see lap lines of metallic because of that. So if I'm trying to make sure that I can see as few lap lines as possible, I'll come back and brush everything in the same direction. And that helps a lot with just painting on metallics. They're not the easiest paint to actually work with, but we're going to be doing a glaze over the top of this, so hopefully the glaze will also hide a lot of the imperfections too. So let me grab my next drawer. So my third drawer here is ready to go. I've got 2 full coats on there. We've got a great pitted hammered metal look going. I just love this look. This totally should hopefully inspire me to get this entire project done sometime really soon. So the next thing that I'm going to do is create a glaze, because I want to give it more depth. So the thing I'm going to be working with here is Modern Masters Wall Glaze, which is a great glazing medium to create your own glaze. And this comes completely clear. Can you see in there, Andy?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a clear medium that you have to tint. I like to tint it with the glazing creams, which I refer to as colorants, because it creates still a transparent color. It doesn't create any opacity to it. But you can tint with paint if you wanted to, or just use the colorants. And then I know there are some glazes out there on the market already that are pre-tinted glazes. So I think General Finishes has some really, they got a beautiful Van Dyke brown also, which is a great glaze to work with. So if you want to try tinting your own so you can customize your colors, you can, or you can buy something that's already pre-tinted. I've already mixed up my glaze. And okay, so before you glaze, you always want to make sure that you're completely dry. And I've always felt with metallics that the longer I can wait, the better, okay? Because metallics are a softer medium, and because they are such a soft paint, I always feel they need a little bit longer to dry. So if you could always let your metallics dry overnight, you're way better time-wise to, or it's just going to glaze easier. Because if your paints haven't dried long enough and they're not what I call sealed or completely, you know, starting to dry down, the glazes will bite into them and they're harder to move on the surface. So this is the glaze that I mixed up. And like I said, I did the glaze that is the Modern Masters, okay? So I've got a Van Dyke brown here. And I'm just going to brush it onto my surface. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. This is cheesecloth, okay? It's one of my favorite things to faux finish with. And it comes on these nice huge bolts, okay? When you pull it off the bolt, it pulls off in these size sheets, which is wonderful because it's ready to go. And then I will take a couple of these and just put them together and create a little pad so that I can wipe back the color. Now, I'm not sure how much everybody knows about glazes, but a glaze basically keeps your color wet. So whether it's colorant I added or you add paint to it, however you decided to color it, it's making that color wet so that you can put it on the surface like I've done and let it sit there. I don't have to panic. I don't have to go back and wipe it really fast. As long as you've got a good glaze with some good open time, and that's what it's referred to as open time. You can glaze up a section this big or bigger. I mean, we glaze up huge wall areas, and we can let it sit here for a minute. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just take my cheesecloth. Let me get this at a better angle so you guys can see this. And wipe off that edge, what leaves it into all the texture of the wood grain. So it's going to bring all the texture of the surface alive, okay? And then I'm going to come over here, and now all the hammered metal look is coming back too. So as you remove it, you'll see that the cheesecloth is getting really dirty, so you can always go to a cleaner section. And how much you remove is totally one of those personal preferences, you know? Everybody kind of likes their glaze a little bit different. Some people like to shear it back to where there's not that much left and it's just kind of like sitting in the nooks and the crannies. Some people like to leave a lot of glaze and let it get, you know, really dark. So there's no wrong way to do it. It just kind of depends on your own personal preference. So I'm wanting it mainly to sit into the low areas and create a whole lot more depth. Which I believe it's doing pretty good. I might come back and wipe off just a little bit more. And I'm not wiping hard. It's almost like a buffing motion, just kind of a soft back and forth. And you don't always have to even remove it even. You know, if you want to remove some areas where you're seeing more of the base color coming through, you can. So it doesn't have to be something you do evenly. You can do it where it has more of an unevenness, kind of a broken coloration, and also will create some depth. Once the glaze is completely dry, the glaze is also giving another layer of protection to the paint. And then I will probably put on 2 or 3 coats of a top coat finish. for extra durability, because like I said, this is going to go in my office and it's going to take over as a bookcase. And not that I'm rough and tough, but there's going to be an awful lot of stuff on it and it's going to get used for years. And I'm one, whenever I do something, I never want to have to redo it, so I'm going to protect it really well. Top coats, Modern Masters makes a really great top coat. I also have one by Proceed. You know, if you have your favorite one, you can try that. Because this is a metallic finish, I'm going to keep my top coat at least a satin or higher in sheen, so that I don't flatten out the metallic sheen of the paint itself. And this project, you can see how quick this really went, okay? So if I was doing this and doing each drawer, I mean, other than the dry time in between the layers, I mean, each process doesn't take more than maybe, you know, 15-20 minutes, and it's just a matter of letting each layer dry. So it really is a quick finish to do. And thank you guys for joining me. We'll see you soon.